Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Art Estopinan is a government consultant and political advisor in the D.C. area. He's also a parent advocate for a son with a rare disease. The disease, TK2-related mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome, causes progressive muscle weakness. The prognosis for his son was not good, but Art's efforts to find a medical solution led to clinical trials at Columbia and Johns Hopkins. And through his foundation, TK2 Cures, he's become an international force in advocating for children with rare disease. Please welcome Art to Bump in the Road. I'd like to welcome Art Estopinan today to Bump in the Road. Art, give us a little bit of background on your story.
Oh, thank you so much, Pat. It's a great pleasure to be here. So I am, I guess, unwilling participant in the sense that why I'm here, because when I became a dad, I never knew that what we had in store with our little son, with our little boy. I never imagined that we would have all of the medical interwounds that we've had with him, because when you become a father or a mother, you never know what God has in store for you, or what history has in store for you. So I'm here because we've had a really challenging time with our son's medical history, but I am better for it. My wife and I are more blessed because of it, and I would never change anything about it.
Wow, that's a question I always ask everybody. And given what you and Olga have been through dealing with, it's TK2 is the name of the disease, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
I'm absolutely taken back that you would not change anything. Why?
Well, because the whole name of the disease is TK2 mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome, and we have a website for him. It's www.tk2cures.com. The reason why I wouldn't, Pat, is because uh, it's a blessing. In the beginning, I thought that it was a curse, that we have been cursed, because I'm like, my God, what have I done to deserve this? Because I guess when people have this kind of affliction, that you are told by the doctors, your baby will die in 2 months. There's nothing to do. Take him home and make him feel comfortable. Olga and I were devastated. And she, as a mom, said that she had a feeling in her stomach that something was bad. I was, as a guy, we're accused of being clueless, and I guess I was clueless, because I was like, well, as long as I work, I bring home money, I'm good. That's what, as little boys, we're taught to do, and take care of the family, and that's it. But women have a more maternal and instinctual feeling, and so she felt something back. But to get back to the focus of the question, I would not change it, because we have been able to help so many children because of my son's suffering. And in the beginning, I didn't see that. I was totally blinded as to, why does our baby have to die? I don't understand. This is not what we are growing up to believe. We're growing up to believe the parents die first, and then the children. We were just devastated, because our son was born healthy, he was born normal, and then all of a sudden we saw him dying before our very eyes, and we didn't know what the hell was going on. And so we were like, why is this happening? And so we were just devastated.
How did you even start to navigate the medical system? Because there is no clear path when you're dealing with rare diseases.
Oh, Pat, it was horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. I cannot begin to describe uh, how we had to take him. We used to live in Arlington, Virginia, because I used to work for the federal government in Washington, D.C. So we lived in a suburb called Arlington, just outside of the capital, literally 10 minutes away, just crossing the Potomac. And and we had to rush him to DC Children's Hospital in Washington, DC was the closest hospital. And he had high fevers. So we used to rush him in the middle of the night or in the mornings, and just going by, because I work in Washington right now. I just going driving by where we used to live and where we used to have those close to, he coded blue several times in that house. The feelings that I get from just driving by that property is incredible. So we didn't know. We're not my in my wife's family. All of the men have been physicians. Her father was a surgeon. Her uncle is a surgeon. Her all of her uncles are surgeons, and her grandparents were doctors. So, but in my family, none of my family were doctors, so I had no idea. I thought that you go to the hospital or to the doctor because you broke your arm or you broke your leg, and then they mend it. They put a brace, they mend it, and you're all good to go. You're good to go home. But for rare diseases, it's not as simple as A and B equals C. For rare diseases, it is a beginning of a needle in a haystack sort of puzzle. And many of the doctors thought that we were making it up. I even had to convince his pediatrician that there was something wrong, that I thought he was choking, because for my son's disease, it's a slow death. His body begins to become paralyzed. So it's called muscular myopathy. It could actually affect all of the major organs, the brain, the liver, the heart. But in his case, thank God, only has manifested by muscular myopathy. So he couldn't swallow. So I noticed that we had a lady who would take care of him because my wife was working at the time. And I would ask her, Anna, do you notice that he cannot swallow? And eventually, it would take 3 hours. I'm not kidding, Pat, for her to feed him. And then my wife would come at night, and she was becoming more and more anxious because she had this inner voice that something was going on. So we took him to the hospital over and over again. And then eventually they told us, listen, Art, there's nothing that we see. Your son is a puzzle. And I guess that's another sign of a rare disease, because when the hospital tells you, like DC Children's Hospital, which is a really good hospital, tells you that, then you're like, well, what do you do then?
Yeah, where do
You
you
know?
go from there? And how do you even plot a course?
Well, I had a good friend who had a good contact at John Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, which in pre-COVID-19 took 2 hours commute because of so much traffic. Um, but we knew that when DC Children's Hospital told us that he was a mystery, then we had to take him to another hospital. And John Hopkins Hospital is one of the world premier hospitals. So we took him to see a pediatric geneticist, Dr. Cohen, who was awesome. And he says, your son has a muscular disorder. We don't know what he has, but he has a muscular disorder. So we he decided to do a muscular biopsy, and then he actually gave us the wrong diagnosis. But we don't blame him because this is so rare. And he told us, listen, I believe that it is, according to the specs that we see here from the biopsy, we believe that it's reversible and benign. However, he says if it's really rare, then this is not the correct diagnosis. At the same time, the geneticists at DC Children's had sent a test to Baylor College in Houston, Texas, which is a blood sample, so that they could do his testing for different types of energy, storage energy deficient diseases, because you cannot do all of once. There's 7,000, I think, rare diseases. So you cannot test them all at once.
Just pediatric rare diseases?
I believe I believe rare diseases in general is
Yeah.
what I have learned. 7,000. So she told us I have to do several what I suspect are several potential diseases that he may have in the plasma testing. So she did, and Lord and behold, the TK2 came back as positive. The test took 3 months. Mind you, at during this time, we saw him deteriorating significantly. Remember, it's a slow death, and this was in 2012. So July 26th, I will never forget the date. July 26th, 2012. She told us, your baby, there's nothing to do. Just take him home, and he just make him comfortable, and he will be with you for about 2 months or so. And I looked at her in her eyes, and I said, doctor, I appreciate the diagnosis, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't know what was wrong with our baby. But I could guarantee you that we will never stop. I will go home and I will search Earth from the East Coast to the West Coast, from America to Europe, wherever, but I will not stop searching for a potential cure for our son. And I had no idea, Pat. I mean, I don't know. I'm just a regular guy. I have no idea about medicine. So, but I did know that I had to do everything that I could to try to save our baby, and that's what I did.
And he's doing pretty well now, isn't he?
Yes, ma'am. So I embarked on a search. It took me from July the 26th to late September, but I was able I went to Harvard, from Harvard to Stanford, and every Ohio Children's Hospital, everywhere in between. And I was able to find a team at Columbia University Medical Center in New York City, um, after some friends of mine at NIH helped me out as well, and told me, listen, we're having a clinical protocol. And Pat, I couldn't believe it, because this was my last hope. So I had contacted and hospitals in Italy and Paris, everywhere. I mean, everywhere that you could think, as many of the listeners probably have done as well. And I nearly fell off the chair. And I told the doctor, Dr. Michio Hirano, who's a leading mitochondrial pediatric expert. He told me, yes, Mr. Estopinan, we're doing a clinical trial, because I couldn't believe it, Pat. I mean, it was incredible. This was the first ray of hope that I saw. And I repeated the diagnosis, and he said, no, I understood what you said. And yes, we have a clinical protocol.
That's
And
unbelievable. How many people
yeah,
did they enroll in this?
my son was the first one. My
Mhm.
son was the first human uh, in the United States to receive this medication before there were the mice. And that's why I think they hesitated, because, as you know, the medical profession is very weary of proceeding with anything new for children. And I told them, Olga and I will sign whatever waivers you want us to sign, but you guys are our only hope. His nurse gave me a date in December. And I said, no, ma'am, We will be there next week. Please give us a date. Please give us a date. So at this time, we drove with him everywhere because we used to have a place in South Florida. We work here in the DC area, but we had all our families are in South Florida, so we used to fly a lot. But every time we flew, he would get very sick because of all of the germs on the planes. So we decided just to drive him, and he was not doing well at all, Pat. He was days away before he would leave us. So Olga was like, I don't think this is a good idea to drive all the way from Virginia to New York City. And but the thing is that she didn't know is that I already had gone to NIH, and they had told me he needs to get on a ventilator and he needs all kinds of support. And and that's why I told her no, just care for him and take him, handle him as best as possible, and and he fell asleep. That's why we were able to continue, because I knew something in my heart told me that if we did not take him to Colombia, he would not make it. And so the doctor examined him, and we have videos in his website, the tk2cures.com, that
Hmm.
you could see how he was barely. I mean, he was literally days away. So Columbia, we also became very lucky because Columbia University Medical Center is another prestigious hospital. So they put him immediately in the pediatric ICU, and little by little he became better. We were able to get him a medical aircraft over to John Hopkins because I had to come back to work. We were there for 3 weeks, so they were able to stabilize him enough that we were able to get him to John Hopkins, and then at least John Hopkins was closer to our home. We stayed in the Ronald McDonald's house that John Hopkins had, and as you can imagine, Pat, it was very very difficult, the whole scenario. But we have had, I don't know if it's a guardian angel, or we have had someone guiding us throughout this whole process. So we feel very fortunate. And then eventually we're in the third generation now, or second generation of the medication. As you know, and anyone that knows about rare diseases, the medications are key. And little by little, he's been gaining strength, and we're very fortunate that he's happy, because as long as he's happy, we're good. Things that we take for granted, sitting up by himself, being able to be, before he couldn't do anything, he couldn't move at all. When we brought him home 7 years ago, the only thing he was able to move was his eyes. He had a neck brace. He couldn't move at all. And then little by little, becoming more vocal, and he's moving more and more and more. And when he was very sick at John Hopkins, he's coded blue several times, and it's all been in Olga's arms because I've been working. So one November, I remember November of 2012, when he just started on the medications. We called the priest because we're Catholics, and we asked him to give him the Holy Sacrament of the sick, because they didn't think he was going to make it. And then we were all wearing the mask and the gowns and all of that. And then he opened his eyes, and I'll never forget Father Brown, who was the Jesuit priest that we called. He jumped back, and I said, "Father, are you okay?" And then he said, "Yes, yes, I'm just happy. I'm just happy." And from then on, little by little, he's been getting stronger and stronger. But it's been a really, really, really tough road. Um, several times here at home, he's had mucus plugs. The reason why we moved here is because we were 5 minutes away from the hospital. So after living for 6 months in the Ronald McDonald's house, the doctors, thank God, decided to continue to help us because I think that many hospitals would have said, listen, according to the medical data that we have, your son is not going to make it. So why continue all of this?
But how much
So
data do they really have? I mean, they don't have data going back 50 years or anything.
no. So in 2012, the doctor gave me a couple of studies that a couple of Scandinavian countries had done in Sweden and Denmark, I think. And they weren't even clinical studies. They were studies not by people, with animals. And so I think as physicians, they saw him getting a little bit better, and then I put his doctor, Dr. Hirano, in touch with them, and so you're absolutely right, Pat. They really did not have hardly any medical data. The only thing that they saw our constant persistence, and that the fact that he wasn't dying. And so we did a tracheostomy, a G tube, a gastrointestinal tube. And so doctor told me, listen, as long as he could receive nutrition and breathe, even with a tracheostomy, with a ventilator, then he would be okay. But it's a big if. No one knew what was going to happen. So we just asked, please, help our son. And we were there day and night. My wife, my sisters, my mother-in-law. I mean, it's a family affair because, as parents cannot do this by ourselves because, and even though they're good hospitals, you need to be there because you have some young fellows or interns who are like, oh, I think it's this, I think it's that, let's experiment here. And I'm like, who told you that? I said, I'm sorry, doctor, but who told you could do that? I did not give my approval for that.
No,
So I would tell,
I think navigating this medical system, you're underscoring such an important point, and that is that you have to be somewhat aggressive, proactive, and you have to be able to not take no for an answer.
you're absolutely right. Spot on. You're spot on. It got to the point that the head of the PICU at Hopkins, Dr. Jim Fackler, who he and I are friends now, told me, Art, I'm the guy with the gray hair around here. I make the decisions. Here is my cell phone, my personal cell phone. You call me when there's a problem and I will fix it. I was like, thank you, doctor. That's what I needed. You're absolutely right. And that's exactly right because you have all these young doctors that feel like they could experiment or do whatever they want to do, and just one little divergence of his treatments or respiratory therapies or whatever can mean death for our son. So you're absolutely right. That was part of the problem. But John Hopkins has been wonderful. We lived there for a whole year. He was in the PICU for a whole year. Then before coming home, they sent him to Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is a pediatric rehab center, also outstanding here in Baltimore. So Baltimore, the Charm City, has been good to us, and we're very happy to be here in Baltimore, and it has been a true blessing.
But this experience has taken you beyond Baltimore. You got very involved in a case in the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, ma'am. So that's an interesting story. So Connie Yates, Charlie Gard's mother, called my wife because now we're all connected because of the internet and social media. We're all connected all over the world. So she called my wife, and my wife said, "Listen, let you speak to my husband because he's the one that takes care of all of that." I'm the one who takes care of all of the doctors, and even though she does his immediate doctors, but I'm the big picture guy. She's with him 24/7, and I am too. But she takes care of him. I take care of the logistics, and so I put her in touch with Dr. Hirano, because Connie was like, "Oh, Art, my son was just diagnosed. It's a mitochondrial disease as well, but it's like a cousin of TK2. It's RRM2B, and so it's like it's a cousins they call it. And so Dr. Hirano, with other doctors, prescribed a plan for little Charlie in the beginning. And then the doctors in the UK were going to follow it, but then they decided not to. We don't know the reason why, but they thought that, it was impossible for Charlie to get strong like my son.
So just no medical care for Charlie?
No, no, just well, they sustained him, but basically is Charles and Connie Yates just watched their little boy Charlie die because they refused to give him the medication that he needed. So it was very sad. So in reality, the UK medical system, the single payer system, just watched him. They fought to kill him in the court rather than to treat him in the hospital with an experimental medicine. And I became very, very involved because I opened our house to all of the British press from BBC, Sky News, Good Morning Britain. I mean, my wife was like, not one more camera in this house. But I told her, but we we need to make sure that the British people see that our junior is able to become strong, and he's able to get better. And because we need to try to protect Charlie. And Connie tells me, Connie says, you fought as if he was your own blood. You fought for Charlie as if he was your own blood. And I told her, well, Connie, how can I? I mean, how can I not help you guys? We're all in this together. We're one big family. And I went to London, we had a protest with a whole bunch of British parents in front of the children's hospital in the UK. And but unfortunately, as we all know, the doctors waited too long, and at some point, almost a year they waited, and by that time it was too late for little Charlie. But you're absolutely right. We have also worked hard to help. We're helping right now a little girl in Turkey who's getting remarkably stronger. And there are kids in Brazil, in Romania, in Korea, in Chile, all over the world. And we're connected now via WhatsApp, all of the families. We call the TK2 Familia, which is family. And that's why I said that we're very blessed, because my son was the first one to go through this, and because of him, I'm sure that there would have been other children, but I think that he has had a true impact on all of their lives. And our wish one day is for all of our children to be strong enough to maybe have a weekend in Disney World or something like that. That's one of the things I used to tell him when he was very sick, and I didn't want him to die, of course, as his parent, as his father. I would tell him, I would whisper in his ear, if you get strong enough, we're going to take you, mom and I are going to take you to Disney World. Because I used to tell him that Mickey Mouse lived there. He didn't know that was Cinderella's castle, but but I used to tell her, Mickey Mouse lives there, Goofy and Minnie Mouse and everyone, and we're going to take you to Walt Disney, because he used to, he loves Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and stuff like that. I mean, he was one and a half.
Oh, I can
So, but
remember
he's,
being older than 1.5 and still loving all those characters.
but all of the doctors have told us that he's a fighter. He's they couldn't believe it. They just couldn't believe it because they would read that this is a fatal disease, and they just couldn't believe how much he was fighting. He's fighting to live. He wants to live, and and we want to help him to fight as long as he could fight.
If you could distill this down to a few points for another parent facing a rare disease, what advice would you give them?
I would tell him never give up. As long as your child is fighting, be strong, stay strong because they need you. Perhaps you have weak moments that you have to break down, but never do it in front of them, and just know that a hospital may be doing a clinical protocol or a clinical trial, and just reach out. The internet now has so much information, and just make sure that you reach out every single corner that you can. Get well informed. I read, Pat, those medical journal reports about mitochondrial conditions and research from Sweden and from Denmark, and wherever I could find it. Some Americans as well, but I would read it like 5 times, literally, because there's so much scientific words and that I didn't understand as a non-physician, but it was for my son. So never give up. Always try to reach out to your whole network, whoever you can reach out to, and that's what I would say. Just keep on fighting because your defenseless baby needs you, and as long as you're happy and they want to live, keep on fighting with them.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. Bump in the Road is a production of Cancer Road Trip. Subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media at Cancer Road Trip, and you can learn more at www.cancerroadtrip.com. Until next time, be safe and be well.